Hi, my name is Misty Waters, and I am a student at GCU. I'm studying the laws forming and surrounding special education. I am currently in SPD-300. Carrie Fitzmaurice is my instructor, and today is July 25th, 2021. Before the 1970s, little was available for disabled students. They were denied adequate schooling before legislation ensured equal education opportunities. This was known as a dark period in special education history. There are laws that govern special education, and there are laws that govern public schools. The United States Department of Education enforces Section 504, a civil rights law that prohibits discrimination on a basis of disability in programs and activities, both public and private, that receive federally funded assistance. Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, known as IDEA, governs special education. Many civil actions brought us to where we are today in the inclusion of special education. Some of those civil actions are Brown versus the Board of Education in 1954. They ruled that children have the right to an education on equal terms, whatever their race. This decision on equal rights to education was later used in other cases regarding educating children with disabilities. Pennsylvania Association for Retarded Children, PARC, versus Pennsylvania in 1972 was a lawsuit challenging the state's policy of excluding children with intellectual disabilities from public education and barred the state from denying children with disabilities from being denied access to public education and training. Mills versus the Board of Education of District of Columbia in 1972, where the court rules that a child with a disability could not be excluded from a regular school unless an adequate educational alternative service was provided to meet the child's need, with periodic review, progress, and adequate educational alternatives. Some of the acts that were formed were the Elementary and Secondary Education Act of 1965. This provided free and reduced lunch programs, initiatives to help low-income families, and additional teachers for low-income schools. The Vocational Rehabilitation Act in Section 504 of 1973 prohibits discrimination in terms of federal funding and provides the definition for the term appropriate education. Educational Amendments Act of 1974 gives students and their families the right to due process in cases of special education and grants federal funds for gifted and talented students. Education for All Handicapped Children Act, EHA, 1975, which would later be renamed IDEA, defines least restrictive environment, allows individualized education programs, and requires free and appropriate public education for all students with disabilities. Education of Handicapped Acts Amendment of 1986 provided early prevention for children birth to 2 years old with disabilities and free education for children 3 to 5 with disabilities. The Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA, of 1990 allowed for due process in education, transition programs at age 16, and extends special education services including rehabilitation and social services. It allows for bilingual programs and confidentiality for all students' information. The Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA, of 1997 added general education teachers to be part of the IEP team. Students with disabilities are part of the state testing. There's behavior management programs are allowed, mediation to resolve differences and conflicts, and students with disabilities continue education even expelled from their school. The No Child Left Behind Act of 2001 provides early intervention programs for reading, highly qualified teachers, increased accountability is placed on schools, and the school choice for students from failing schools. The IDEA Improvement Act, also known as IDEIA, of 2004, has higher standards for special education teacher licenses and certifications, an increase in funding for early prevention services, and a use of the response to intervention. Every Student Succeed Act of ESSA of 2015 gives states more control on terms of standardized testing and consequences for low performance. Allowing alternative testing can be done, but may only be made up of 1% of students, and supports the bullying prevention programs. There are many resources available for parents and teachers. The Department of Education has a website full of information. Nevada Department of Education, Special Education IDEA has lots of information and resources, as well as the National PTA for Special Education. They have a toolkit full of resources.